coming out of that, balancing the budget. But we weren't there to make any political statement. We weren't there to say, okay, what is our base or anything like that. Our purpose was to get the job done. And we were anxious to open the government, get a negotiation, and get a real agreement done. And that's exactly what we did. So they were, both sides have to have an interest in settling this. And look what's happening. Now it's starting to set in on people. I think for the first few weeks, they weren't paying that much attention. But now it's like, what is going on down there? Can't they just serve the country? And it seems like a number of them are afraid to step off of the curb onto the street and say, let's do this. And that's not good. Both sides going to have to give something, get it done, move on, because it's starting, it's hurting these people.
A couple points. One, you were involved with shutdowns that involved the entire budget. This is over a relatively small amount of money in terms of the overall budget here.
Right.
And then we're getting this report from the White House today. It's twice as bad, twice as big of an impact on GDP.
Saw that.
As if to say, who knew that a government shutdown?
That might put the pressure on the administration to move. And my sense is I was never the president, and as a governor, we never had a shutdown. But I think it's incumbent on the leader to be able to try to bring people together and get something done. And I just don't see it. And it takes both sides, however. You can't just have one side and not the other. So they both have to give. I wonder a little bit if the Democrats are kind of enjoying this because the numbers are all going against the president. They don't seem to be very engaged in this. I was talking to a Republican senator who I trust the other day, and he was telling me that they're not really participating. He was going to have a meeting with Joe Manchin. I said, well, what about Tom Carper? What about some of the moderates? He said, they don't seem to be showing up. However, it takes both sides, and you can't deal with somebody who every time you say we got an agreement, he changes the agreement. I mean, you can't do that.
That's their problem. I mean, that's what Democrats promise is that they have come out and they claim.
We pay them to do their job.
Listen, though, what Democrats say is that if they now do offer something up, then this tactic worked. Then you can just shut down the government whenever you want to prove a point.
Yeah, well, shutting the government down is not a good thing. It rattles financial markets. And the real question here, I think, as you both note, is that if this becomes a habit, like every time we have a problem, we just shut the government down because it really doesn't matter, that really rattles financial markets, which means that it hurts people on Main Street. And when you think about these folks on Main Street, I mean, they got to pay their mortgages. They have to pay their kids' bills. I mean, it's got to end.
How much of a political problem is it for Republicans that the president went into all of this and said, I will own this shutdown?
I don't know that most people really remember that. And the other thing I think you have to remember is right now, because this is going on so early, just soon after an election, these things get forgotten. The Republican Party challenge, though, is in a country that is becoming increasingly diverse, do they have ideas where they can relate to the folks? Because they took a whooping here in the midterm election because their issues were taking health care away, not creating a better health care plan. In other words, Republicans have to become more idea-oriented. The Democrats are not going to win by going hard left. This country's not hard left. This country is center-right.
Let's talk about Bill Barr and the confirmation hearing. Should Bill Barr have to release the Mueller report at the end of it?
Of course, we all think he should. I mean, I don't know how he doesn't. He's probably trying to preserve himself some space, but you can't have this thing go on for a couple years and then we go, okay, we'll give you a paragraph here that tells you what the conclusion is. I think people will demand it. And one way or another, it's going to get out. I mean, it's Washington. Everything leaks out. So, of course, it has to be released. That's for credibility. That's for moving forward. And I hope it comes out soon. I hope there's no problem for the president in it. I really do. I'm worried about our country.
There was one other unusual
I'm worried about the economics. I'm worried about the trust in institutions. But that calls up one other thing. Instead of relying on all the politicians to solve problems, this is a call now to action for people to fix things where they live.
Let me ask you, because you say you don't want to trust the politicians here. One other curious thing he did say in his testimony is that if the ethics professionals inside the Justice Department recommend recusal from oversight of the Mueller investigation, he wouldn't guarantee that he would accept their recommendation. Do you think he should take that recommendation?
He's got to use his own judgment. I mean, you get a lot of opinions. When you're a decision maker, you get a lot of opinions. And his most important decision now in this job is how does he release a report and how is their credibility established for the office of the president and the whole administration?
Let's talk about Congressman Steve King. Why this week are Republicans so distressed by his comments? He said a lot of racist comments.
You know, it just rises to the level where they say enough is enough. And, you know, members are really reluctant, and they've been on both sides of the aisle. They're very reluctant to point their finger at anybody. But these kind of comments, it just went over the top, and they said enough is enough.
Well, so far what they said enough to is the comments. They haven't said enough to him. Republicans have kicked him off committees.
Yeah.
He's not on committees, but he's still in Congress. Some, but not all, are saying he should resign.
No, he should leave. I mean, this is really not it's a terrible situation. Plus, he's not going to get any help in the campaign. If he doesn't resign, he might enjoy these last couple of years because he's not going to be back.
Do you think that this is a tipping point somehow for other things? For instance, so many people say, well, the president says offensive things routinely. The president says racially tinged things.
Well, you remember Charlottesville. We all, I mean, a lot of us spoke out.
Yeah, of course. But that is somehow, Steve King, a proxy for the frustration that so many people feel about what the president is saying, but they can't take it out on the president.
I don't. I think that the King's comments are so blatant that they really. There's a number of them that feel it's just terrible. Others that say, look, politically, this is just crazy. But some deep down inside, and I like to think most, say this kind of hate speech is terrible. In terms of the president, you know, look, we can criticize him for what he did in Charlottesville, but he didn't rise to that level. I don't think he rose to the level. We're nowhere close to where Steve King is.
He said there's good people on both sides.
I thought it was outrageous what he said. You know, it was. I mean, look, I didn't vote for him. Okay, the division that he's created in our country is what has concerned me. And now, even take the shutdown. It seems as though it's all about the base. You know, I got to have my base supporting me. That's not the way a president, in my opinion, should lead. You want to expand your base. You want to have more people supporting you. When I was governor, I just didn't want Republicans. I wanted everybody to like me.
Who'd you vote for?
I voted for McCain. I already told everybody that.
I want to ask you about the president again and Steve King, because the president claims that he hasn't paid any attention to the Steve King situation.
He should say something about it, period. End of story.
What should he say?
We should condemn it. Say this is wrong. I mean, that's what he should do. But I don't know what he's going to do. If we try to figure out what Donald Trump is going to do, okay, then we could prepare news like it used to be 3 hours earlier. Now we could prepare the news 5 minutes before we go
didn't even
on.
give you that amount of lead time. We didn't even tell you what we'd be talking about 5 minutes beforehand. Is the government shutdown going to end this week?
Some people are saying that he's going to declare a national emergency, put it in the courts, lose in the courts, and say I did my best, and you know there's the courts for you. That's what I hear, but I don't know that. That's just another wild rumor.
I'm glad you're here.
Wow. All right. All right, Governor John Kasich, welcome to the team. We're glad to have you here. Good to have you up early. Remember, this is the most important show.
I have been told that.
But hold on a second. You don't like getting up early. I know this.
Well, I get up. I don't like getting up real early, but I do get up.
But then you have you work out.
I'm just an energetic guy.
I know.
I need my
you have a
sleep.
system.
Look how good I look.
You're fantastic. I know. Why aren't we following your lead? Yes.
All right, Governor, great to have you here. Thanks so much. Sources in the White House tell the New York Times, Maggie Haberman, there is a power shift going on. The advisor reportedly now running the West Wing, at least unofficially, next. The president's nominee for Attorney General, while vowing to protect Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, says the American people may not see Mueller's final report. Instead, William Barr will write a summary report to Congress on the conclusions from Robert Mueller. Joining us now is Maggie Haberman, White House correspondent for the New York Times. Maggie, among the other things that William Barr said is that he's really good friends with Robert Mueller, thinks that Robert Mueller is a stand-up guy, and really could not say enough things.
Not a witch hunt. Not
a witch hunt at all. So we were wondering, particularly Allison was wondering, what the president made of all that.
Look, I think that the president was well aware of all of this, as Bill Barr made clear in his hearing. And I have to say that there were certainly moments that I think the Democrats felt that he had been caught on. But of all of the nominees that we have seen President Trump send to the Senate, he did fairly well, and his confirmation is, I think, all but assured. That said, he didn't say anything that you have to assume. He didn't say anything that he has not said directly to President Trump about either his relationship with Robert Mueller or how this ultimate report to the Justice Department is going to be handled in terms of Congress. Look, the reality of how President Trump deals with people as opposed to sort of the perception of how it could be ahead of time. There's often a wide gap there. Things that don't sound so problematic to President Trump in the abstract can be problematic in real time. So we don't know what this ultimately looks like when there is a final report, what Bill Barr ultimately will do with it. But if you're President Trump and you're concerned about that report becoming public, which we know that his folks are, I think he heard things that he was happy about from Bill Barr.
So when Bill Barr says that he may synthesize and filter the results and release them, that is something that the president has wanted.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there have been a lot of assumptions made about what will happen with this report. It's been widely described as a report to Congress. It's really a report to the Justice Department. And it was never a sure thing, number one, that it would not have heavy redactions if it ever did become public. Bill Barr made clear he probably won't make it public. It's not a definite, but he certainly did not lean into the idea of a full open disclosure. He leaned into the idea of him giving, or whoever the AG is, giving a report of their own to Congress and summarizing the findings. That is probably Donald Trump's best hope. I think it is very unlikely the full report itself doesn't ultimately leak. I just think that that's the nature of these things. But if it leaks as opposed to being released publicly, then it becomes something of a fraught document where we know what the president does with these things. We have to assume he will have the same practice where he will call it fake or it's twisted and so forth. And I think that just allows everybody to settle into their pre-existing conclusions.
The longest government shutdown in U.S. history now, day 26. The White House team of economists now says it's twice as bad for the economy as they had predicted. Does that mean, what are you hearing about whether or not that this White House and this president feels that sting and it might cause some movement?
I think there is a divide between the president and this White House. I think a lot of people in the White House have been privately urging him to move on, get this done with, bend in some way, do something that can be characterized as a win, or come up with a third way where maybe the Senate opens, and we've had various proposals on this, the Senate finds a way to the Republican-held Senate finds a way to reopen the government so that Nancy Pelosi doesn't claim a victory. But the president is very dug in still. He's getting very agitated. He is not happy watching the headlines. He was not happy with the quote-unquote reviews of his speech, which polls have shown did not move, his Oval Office address did not move any public perception about the wall or about this fight. And the headlines are getting worse and worse. That said, I still think we're in for a while longer.
So does the economic damage report assessment get his attention the way other things have not?
Definitely gets his attention, but it's not as if he wasn't aware of it, although, as you know, he tends to see things as if they are more real when they are on TV or in print than when they're being told to him by his own advisors. So we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of days. But that is what he has staked his reelection on, is the idea that there's going to be a good economy, and I do think that that will catch his eye more than most things.
So, Maggie, over the last 2 days, I understand you've heard from sources as to whom they think is actually running the White House as the de facto chief of staff. Who might that be?
That would be one relative, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. And look, what you will hear from people around Jared Kushner is, that's silly. He's focused on what he wants to do. He's got his own discrete pieces of work. And those things are true. But as it was true during the campaign, that whoever was actually in charge, especially in the later stages of the general election campaign, Jared Kushner was really behind the scenes, managing most of it, taking credit when things went well and sort of distancing himself from things when they didn't. That is true now more than ever. Mick Mulvaney is not seen internally as a particularly strong chief of staff, and that's because he is not providing much of a buffer between the staff and the president. Jared Kushner has been rising internally. We have seen him part of these negotiations on the Hill, even though he really doesn't have a ton of relationships beyond his work on criminal justice reform. He is feeling ascendant.
Here is a little excerpt of Chris Christie's new book, soon to be published, called Let Me Finish, in which he is apparently spilling some secrets and palace intrigue, and he talks about Jared Kushner. This is through The Guardian, so this hasn't been officially released yet, but here it is. Christie says that Steve Bannon made clear to me that one person, and one person only, was responsible for the faceless execution that Steve was now attempting to carry out. Jared Kushner, still apparently seething over events that had occurred a decade ago. He's talking about why he was ousted from the transition team that He put Jared Kushner's father in jail a decade ago, and that Jared Kushner has, of course, never forgotten that and holds a grudge and had the knives sharpened for Chris Christie.
I think there's no question that there is no love lost between Jared Kushner and Chris Christie, and there is certainly no doubt that Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon ultimately took over that transition, along with Mike Pence, by the way, who often doesn't really get mentioned over that period when Chris Christie was fired almost immediately after the election. Look, I think that those two have found a way to work together, Christie and Jared Kushner. They certainly did during the campaign, but we know that during the campaign, Jared Kushner tried to block Christie coming on to lead the transition in the first place. There is no reason to doubt that account, and while Jared Kushner and Stephen Bannon are obviously not pals anymore, that was a period of time right after the election when they were very close and they were working in tandem.
It doesn't appear as if Chris Christie is over it at this point, as his book is coming out at the end of January.
Well, let me finish. I think you're right.
So let me just read you another excerpt.
Sure.
This time it's from Axios. This is what Christie says of the White House personnel, presumably now including the de facto chief of staff that you're naming, Jared Kushner, here. He calls it a revolving door of deeply flawed individuals, amateurs, grifters, weaklings, convicted and unconvicted felons who were hustled into jobs they were never suited for, sometimes seemingly without so much as a background check via Google or Wikipedia.
I don't think everything comes down to the reductionist prism of a personal slugfest, right? I mean, I think that if you're Christie, I think there is a really valid claim, and there's been a book written about this, about how much of the root of Trump's problems go back to the dysfunctional transition that took place when they took the work that Christie had done and threw it into the garbage, and that Christie had done with Jeff Sessions, by the way. And then they went about Mike Flynn putting himself in position as the national security advisor, something that Chris Christie had opposed and that I think Jeff Sessions had opposed as well. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump taking over in terms of assigning people to different billets in the government. I think that it is much, you have to remember that Christie is somebody who spent a lot of time working for the Department of Justice as a prosecutor. If you're somebody who cares about government, you are going to look at how this has gone, and it would be hard to argue that this has gone swimmingly. So I think you can understand somebody being defensive of their work. I don't know that it all comes down to a personal shouting match.
Maggie Haberman, thank you very much for all the reporting and insights.
So senators grill the man who could soon run the Mueller probe, oversee the Mueller probe. What else do they want to know from William Barr? We're going to talk to one senator who asked some of the most intriguing questions yesterday. That's next. Do you think it would be incumbent on him to have a strategy to end it?
Well, I think they both ought to have a strategy. And I think that the president is not going to agree to any sort of deal without a border wall. And it looks to me like Speaker Pelosi is not going to agree to any deal with a border wall. And they're not even talking, which tells me they're probably too close to the fight. And if she would appoint someone in whom she has confidence and he would do the same, I think they could work it out in 2 or 3 days.
What's your message to the American people now? Because we learned from the White House team of economists that it's having twice as much of an impact on the economy. It's twice as bad for the economy that they originally thought. Some 800,000 people aren't getting paid. The Coast Guard commandant's telling his people this is the first time that its members have never received paychecks. You know, what do you tell them about how government's doing its job?
Well, my message to the American people is nobody wants to shut down. I don't know a single person up here, not someone who's in good faith and someone who's not drunk on certainty and virtue, who thinks that we ought to have a shutdown. Everybody wants to open it back up. But border security is important. And for whatever reason, the two negotiators here are the president and Mrs. Pelosi, and they're not going to reach an agreement anytime soon, if at all. So you got to go to Plan B. And there is a way to get the government open, but they're both going to have to give. And right now, neither one of them is willing to give an inch. And maybe they ought to just step aside and let 2 other people take a run at it.
So we have a Kennedy plan now on the table. We'll see if either side takes it up. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, pleasure having you on with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, John.
We'll be right back.
As the longest government shutdown in history enters its 26th day, the White House acknowledges the shutdown is causing more damage to the economy than previously estimated. CNN's Jessica Dean spoke with government workers who are getting hit hardest. What did you learn, Jessica?
Well, good morning to you, Allison. Those workers were telling me that really it's the uncertainty that they face as they continue to go without a paycheck. They just don't know when this is going to end, and that's what's been so very difficult and horrible about all of this for them. In the meantime, they're doing whatever it takes to make ends meet.
One.
For the first time in 27 years, Amy Walker is looking for a new job.
When you love what you do at the government, but yet the government is not open for you to go in to work and whatever, you have to take what is available.
Furloughed from her job as an analyst for the IRS and not knowing when the shutdown will end, Walker now spends her time looking for jobs at Walmart, Target, and local grocery stores.
Just to know that my family relies on me or depends on me, and if something is not paid or cut off, food is not put on the table, then it's like, well, Ma, what we're going to do?
And if looking for a job seemed unlikely for Walker just a month ago, so is this. She's now selling some of her belongings, including a favorite purse and shoes, hoping to earn money to pay bills.
One of the things that I have been doing is posting things on Facebook, Marketplace. I've placed things on eBay. I place things on OfferUp.
It's not just Walker. Across the country, there's a wave of financial anxiety as 800,000 federal workers try to make ends meet, not knowing when they'll be paid again. On Craigslist, there are cars, children's toys, and video game consoles, all being sold because government workers need quick cash. Over 40,000 Coast Guard members are among those affected. The branch's top official said to the best of his knowledge, this is the first time in U.S. history service members in a U.S. armed force have not been paid during a lapse in appropriations. Unlike the other branches, it's funded through the Department of Homeland Security.
We've kind of put together a speed dating forum.
In Virginia, Fairfax County Public Schools added a second hiring event for furloughed workers after the first one was so popular it quickly reached capacity. The schools are offering substitute teacher positions to federal employees desperate to find a paycheck.
We've had to call all our banks and creditors and financial institutions to find out what options are available to be able to get some relief.
The pain of the shutdown visible across the United States. At the Miami airport, free food for TSA workers.
These people are here every day. It's not like they don't want to work. They want to work, but they're not getting paid.
Renowned chef Jose Andres announced he'll serve free meals daily in Washington, D.C. to federal workers and their families.
We believe that no person should have to go through the pain of not knowing to feed the children.
Amy Walker says she's staying as positive as she can. But with a husband on disability, her daughter and grandchildren currently living at their home, and no end in sight for this shutdown, she's reaching a breaking point.
Not being able to, when your family is in need and they're relying on you, and then as much as your heart wants to do and you can't do, it's like a slap in the face. And that's how I feel. The government has really slapped us in the face, and I'm not blaming.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, we do have breaking news right now because there's been an apparent suicide bombing that has rocked a Syrian city northeast of Aleppo, which is patrolled by U.S. troops. This is the first attack since President Trump announced his plan to withdraw American forces from Syria. And CNN's Barbara Starr is live for us at the Pentagon with all of this breaking news. What have you learned, Barbara?
Allison, at this hour, the details are just coming in, and it's very sketchy, but look at the map. This is the city of Manbij in northern Syria. There are dozens and dozens of U.S. troops in the immediate vicinity. They have conducted more than a dozen joint security patrols in the area with Turkish forces. There has been a major blast in the city. There's social media videos showing the impact of this blast. What we don't have confirmed at this hour and do not know is if a U.S. patrol was in the immediate vicinity at the time of the blast. That is going to be a matter of deep concern, obviously. What we know is that a coalition spokesman tweeted a short time ago on social media, and let me just read it, that the coalition is aware of open source reports regarding an explosion in Syria. Coalition forces conducted a routine patrol in Syria today. We are still gathering information and will share additional details at a later time. The key words there that they did conduct a patrol today. We are, by all accounts, talking about the area of Manbij, this city where these very tragic videos are emerging of a major suicide blast there. Manbij is a hot spot right now. This is an area where the Turks, just across the border to the north, want the Kurds out of the general vicinity of the border region. The president is saying U.S. security will be withdrawn as part of the withdrawal eventually. The Russians believe the Syrians should take control of this area. We will have to see exactly what has happened here today, but this is all a very unsettled situation. Allison, John.